Imagine you want to generate an image from pure noise, just random pixels, turning into something meaningful. In modern generative AI, there are two main approaches to do this. One-step models try to learn a single direct mapping, while iterative models break the process into many small steps. One-step models are fast, but notoriously hard to train. Iterative models are stable and powerful, but painfully slow. So here's the question. Can we get the best of both worlds? To answer that, we need to rethink the problem, not as a function, but as a flow. Imagine every data point moving over time from noise to data. The problem is, there are infinitely many ways to move these points. In practice, we simulate these paths step by step. If the path is curved, we need many small steps. But if the path is perfectly straight, we can go from a start to end in just one step. So the fastest possible flow is a straight one. But there's a problem. If we connect noise to data with straight lines, they cross everywhere. And that's where rectified flow comes in. Let's start with the simplest idea. Just connect noise to data using straight lines. But there's a fundamental problem. These paths cross each other, and in a valid flow, trajectories are not allowed to cross. So instead, we start by pairing random noise with real data and interpolate between them. But even then, these straight paths still cross everywhere. The key idea of rectified flow is to untangle these trajectories. Instead of fixing the paths directly, we learn a velocity field, a function that tells every point where to move next. When multiple paths pass through the same point, we simply average their directions. This simple idea gradually removes all crossings. What we get is a smooth, non-crossing flow. But something even more surprising is happening here. To understand this flow better, let's look at the simplest case, just one data point. As time goes on, every point must reach the target exactly at the final moment. It's like a deadline. The closer you are to the end, the faster you have to move. In fact, the required velocity explodes near the end. It goes to infinity. If a model learns this perfectly, it will only reproduce the exact training data. Nothing new. In other words, it overfits. But in practice, neural networks can't represent these infinite velocities. And surprisingly, this limitation is actually a good thing. It forces the model to smooth the flow instead of collapsing into singular points, which means the model can generate new data, not just copy what it has seen. So even the error becomes part of the solution. But here's something surprising. Even though we change the paths, the overall distribution stays the same. At any given time, points are only rearranged, not created, and not destroyed. This property is called marginal preservation. So even after untangling the trajectories, the density at every moment remains unchanged. How is that possible? At any location, multiple paths may pass through, each with a different direction, and we replace them with their average direction. So while directions change, the total flow remains balanced. Nothing accumulates and nothing disappears. The paths change, but the distribution does not. Now, there's another effect of untangling these paths. The total distance traveled becomes shorter. Instead of taking complex routes, points move more directly. This reduces the transport cost. And if we repeat this process, the paths become straighter and straighter until eventually they are almost perfectly straight. At that point, we can simulate everything in just one step. But there's a subtle detail. Straight paths are not always optimal. Optimal transport also requires removing unnecessary rotation. Any flow can be decomposed into two parts, one that moves things forward and one that only spins in place. Rectified flow removes this rotation and keeps only meaningful motion. Now here's an interesting question. If straight paths are the fastest, why do diffusion models use curved ones? The answer is they are actually equivalent. You can bend the path or warp time and still describe the same underlying flow. In fact, models like DDIM are just straight flows in disguise. The difference lies in how time is scaled and how the model is trained. Changing the path changes where the model focuses its learning. Some moments become harder, and the model learns them more carefully. There's also a deeper connection to diffusion models. When the noise is Gaussian, the velocity field becomes directly related to the score function, a function that always points toward higher density. So velocity and score are just two views of the same idea. So far, we followed the smooth paths. But we can also add randomness. This turns the system into a stochastic process where points jitter as they move. This is known as Langevin dynamics. It adds noise, but also a correcting force, like guardrails on a highway. Even if a point drifts away, it gets pulled back to the correct path. This makes diffusion models more robust, but also slower. So how do we get the best of both worlds? The answer is distillation. We take a slow model and train a new one to imitate it, not by copying outputs, but by matching the velocity along the path. This allows the new model to jump directly from noise to data in just one step. So far, we've been moving toward data. But what if not all data is equally good? What if we had a notion of preference, a reward that tells us where we want to go? Then instead of just following the flow, we can gently bend it toward higher reward regions. The trajectories don't break, they adapt. This is reward alignment. But we can't change everything. The flow still has to remain valid. It must preserve a structure and consistency. These are the constraints. So the problem becomes how to bend the flow without breaking it, how to guide generation while keeping everything consistent. And this balance between a structure and preference is where the real power lies. In the end, rectified flow is not just about a speed. It's about finding the right path, straight enough to be efficient, flexible enough to adapt, and structured enough to remain stable. From noise to meaning, from randomness to control, all through the geometry of flow.